The Salt Lake Institute of Genealogy will celebrate its silver anniversary in January 2020. Elevate your genealogical education to new heights. At SLIG, you will learn from the field's top professionals, obtain in-depth instruction, network with respected experts, consult with successful researchers, and research at the Family History Library. Registration opens July 13th, 2019 at 9 a.m. Mountain Time. We've asked the course coordinator to tell us a little bit about the course to help you decide if it's the right fit for you. George Ryskamp and Deborah Gurtler are the course coordinators for Advanced Hispanic Research. Keep watching to learn more about their backgrounds and the course.
I'm George Ryskamp, and I've been doing Hispanic research since 1973 when I went over as a student, Professor Bras student from Brigham Young University. While I was over there, I wrote the paper for the LDS Church on what records existed in Spain. This is before any filming or anything else like that had been done there, and fell in love with Spanish language genealogy. And since that time, I wrote the accreditation tests for the first time, both for Spain and for Mexico. I taught law in Southern California, where I frequently worked with people having legal problems and who spoke Spanish. And I came up here to BYU in 1993, and since that have been teaching both American legal principles, advanced genealogical research classes as the final class that our majors take. And I have been teaching Southern European classes, both in terms of handwriting and in terms of archival systems and record types to the BYU students here. Continue to do that. I've been taking groups of students to Spain, including a number of years ago that Debbie was part of, and have done that with, I've lost track, but it's over 25 different groups since the first group in 1994, and love to do it. And leaving in another 7 days, today being towards the end of April, to go over with the group to Spain for 7 weeks. And we'll have some new adventures and some exciting times there. And I've just fallen in love with all things Hispanic, and except my wife, she's not Hispanic. I love her very much. And she, by the way, having no choice, she's a genealogist, she says, by marriage. She has become a total expert in reading and using 17th and 16th century Spanish records, particularly notarial records, marriage contracts, testaments. In fact, she taught the class on archival systems and records available that Debbie took when she was a student here.
And she will also be joining us as an instructor in our course. My name is Debbie Gurtler, and I work at the Family History Library for Family Search. I manage the team of research specialists that serve guests who come seeking help for their ancestors from Latin America and Southern Europe. So it also includes France, Portugal, and Italy as well. I've been working there since 2011. Before that, I was a student, and I took the fun trip with the Ryskamps to Spain. And then after that, after I started working with Family Search, I've taken another trip to Spain where I visited many of the archives as well. I am accredited. My first accreditation was the United States Mid-South, because that's where my mom's ancestors are all from, and I've done a lot of research in North Carolina and Virginia, South Carolina, and then I added to that the accreditation in Spain, and then just recently, my most recent one has been Mexico. And I love the Hispanic people as well. In 1995, our family moved to South America, and while we were down there, they found out that I liked family history, so they put me to work at the local Family History Center. So I learned a lot there, done lots of indexing, and I just am fascinated by all things Hispanic, and I love Mexican food as well. So I think I make the pretty good enchilada and a pretty good tamale.
course, that's not as good as a Spanish paella. Not that your cooking isn't excellent, but...
No, true.
How long have you been working on genealogy?
I began when I was 11. Do I have to tell you how long ago that was? Let's just put it that way. It's been at least 5 decades, almost 6.
Yeah, and I think I caught the bug when I was a teenager, and well, let's just say it's been 40 plus years. How's that?
How did you become interested in genealogy?
Basically, I was wanting to have something to do. My grandmother lived in Salt Lake, and I wanted to have something to do rather than just sitting around when we were out here on vacation. And so I started going down to the family history library. My mother was always interested. Never did much, but was always interested.
So I've always had a fascination with history, and when I learned about family history and genealogy, it just fit perfectly with what I wanted to do. One of the first things I did when I went away to college, I lived with one grandmother, and the other grandmother lived about 15 minutes away, and I did interviews with the other grandmother that I didn't know as well, and I still have the yellow legal pad that I wrote all the information down on, and so I've just been going since then.
I had a grandmother who was deeply involved in family history and who was not a member of the LDS Church, and my bug was heightened by her and the fact that my father is named after a 5th grade uncle in the family who was very famous. My grandmother was very proud of him and that fact. And so that kind of connected my interest with New England and early Michigan and the family on that side. And I did much more actually on that side than on my LDS ancestry.
Now, my mom has Southern United States roots, and I'm much like George on my father's side. They are heavily LDS members, and so I've been focused a lot on Southern U.S. with my mom's getting stuck with Johnsons in Mississippi, fun stuff like that.
But my passion really intensified when I went to Spain for the first time, and somebody up at the church asked me to prepare a paper about Spanish genealogical resources when I was over there as a study abroad student. And I spent about 2 months out of those 6 months off by myself visiting Spanish archives. And at that point, I was totally hooked.
Yeah, so our family moved to Chile in 1995, and I worked at a local family history center there. I'd always wanted to learn to speak Spanish, and so that was a perfect opportunity for me to perfect my Spanish. And then I loved working with the Hispanic people and the Spanish language. It just was a natural fit for me to learn how to do the Hispanic research.
Yeah, I learned Spanish as a missionary in Argentina and came home with a love of Hispanic peoples. And going to Spain as a study abroad student the first time only increased that even more so.
Have you had any prior SLIG experience?
I taught a Southern European Latin American course about 15 years ago, maybe longer, and also had participated teaching individual classes in both the American legal track courses and in the Hispanic course that they did a number of years ago.
And 3 years ago, I did a lecture as part of John Philip Falletta's immigration course, and it was on Hispanic immigration, and he has asked me, in addition to our course, to teach that lecture again this year as part of his track. And then last year I attended the Portuguese research track and loved it. It was fun.
Yeah, I'll be teaching about civil law in the legal course that Judy Russell has this time, which goes with my interest in legal systems, both American and European, Latin American, and probably has something to do with the fact that I became an attorney and spent 15 years practicing law in Southern California.
What course will you be coordinating?
Well, our course is called Advanced Hispanic Research. And so George and I will be teaching various of the presentations, but we've also invited a wonderful group of other instructors to join us as well. A lot of up-and-comers in the Hispanic genealogy field, most of which are credentialed with AGs or CGs, and so we're really excited to teach this.
As well as several seasoned individuals that were participating.
Please tell us about the course.
It's a course that's designed to take intermediate to advanced researchers in Spanish records and archival systems throughout the Spanish-speaking world, from the basics of records like civil registration and parish records through more advanced sources, including notarial records, and as well as looking at certain problem areas for the researcher.
Yeah, we'll be talking a little bit about archives as well, for those that have not gone to archives, what kind of things they might expect. I think it'll be great.
What are the main topics covered in the course?
We're going to do civil records, civil registration, and parish records. And for those of you who are thinking, well, that's really basic, but we're going to go a little bit deeper in those. We're also going to dive deep into notarial records, military records, the types of things you might find in an archive. And we're also covering various parts of the world, the Hispanic world. We have an expert on colonial New Mexico. We have one from the Caribbean. We have one from South America, Mexico, Spain. So a little bit of everything, but on a little bit more than just your basic beginner level.
Yeah, for example, in the materials on parish records, we'll not only be looking at what the basic records contain, but how to use things like the names of godparents, the information about them to make connections, how to get the most out of marriage records, the kind of information you'd find in death records that you can extend, always with the question of asking, what does the information that you find in a baptismal record or a marriage record, death record, lead you to find other types of records?
Who would benefit the most from this course?
Anyone who already has some experience in using civil registration and parish records and is wanting to learn how to go beyond that in their exploration in Spanish language areas of the world.
It would be important that they have some experience in reading the Spanish records, because we're not really going to touch on that. So we want them to be able to read the records when we dive deep into them.
But I wouldn't put that down as a primary requirement.
No.
Beyond the ability to read parish records.
Yeah.
If they're not able to read basic marriage records and baptismal records, they're going to have trouble following the course. But if they've got that knowledge, we'll walk them through the other things. For example, when we do the section on wills, we'll take literally the will apart, section by section, look at the 11 or 12 components that go into all Spanish wills and what's the language they can expect, and some actual examples as we go.
What basic knowledge should students have before taking the course?
I would assume that they'd have basic knowledge about how to use the computer, how to do computer searches, hopefully some experience in searching indexed records in Spanish, because there are some differences. It helps to know, for example, what the double surname system is that's used in Spain and most of Latin America, where a person has two surnames, their fathers and their mothers, and some basic understanding of that as it applies to index searches. But beyond that, anyone with that basic knowledge, core knowledge of how to use parish and civil registers, should do just fine our course. On the other hand, the person with quite a bit of experience, I think, will still find probably half the classes, if not more, will give them information that they would not otherwise have had, do not have at this point. At least from what I've taught in the past, that's been the case.
What should students expect to learn by the end of the course?
They should know some advanced research methodologies. They will be familiar with notarial records and how they're set up. They'll be aware of the things that you might find in archives. They'll get a deeper dive in the parish records and the civil registration. I think they'll become more expert, maybe, if that's the right word to use, in doing Hispanic research.
Our intention is to take them down and push them off the deep end of the pool.
Yeah, and watch them swim away.
But give them the key to be able to swim once they hit the water. But and it's cliche now to talk about brick walls, but I think we'll be giving them some good techniques on how to use basic records they're already using, and others that they're not even do not at this point have a knowledge of, to be able to break through problem areas that they're having in their ancestral research.
Yeah, probably some good burn parish record strategies as well, for when there aren't any parish records, which is everybody's go-to.
Yeah, and that's a standard problem in almost all Hispanic areas. There are certain areas in the countries that have severe lack of records because of civil wars or hurricanes or a variety of other kinds of man-made and natural disasters that have destroyed records.
What is an interesting teaser about your course?
Well, they might be surprised at where different records are found in different archives. That might be something that they hadn't known before that they would learn.
I think maybe one of the more risque answers might be they may find it fascinating to realize that some of their ancestors married first, second, and third cousins, and that those records that exist, often in the form of marriage dispensations, are excellent ways to connect family history, especially in the 17th century.
I would suspect if they're dyed-in-the-wool researchers, they're going to fall in love with notarial records. I know I have. I wish I could spend more time in them, but I think they'll be surprised at the wealth of information they can find. For example, not just a will, but in a marriage contract, a dowry inventory, a death inventory.
Talking about wealth, Debbie's being modest, but as a student, she wrote an absolutely fascinating paper on the use of marriage records to look at marriage records and testaments to look at the wealth patterns and passage of wealth from women to their daughters. And that, by the way, is something that's very different. In many of these countries, you'll have areas where anywhere from 30 to 60% of the wills are written by women, and not just single women, but married women as well. Because unlike Anglo-American areas where the women had practically no rights, and the law said once they married, they became part of their husband's property, so to speak, women in Spanish-speaking societies had the right to own property, had the right to give that property to their own children, and exercise those rights frequently in marriage contracts and wills to protect the rights of their children against the possibility that those husbands were going to remarry.
We hope you enjoyed learning about the Advanced Hispanic Research SLIG course. Registration for SLIG courses opens July 13th, 2019. Check out the website slig.ugagenealogy.org for more information.